2011 was the lowest point in Jack's life. As a recent law graduate from a prestigious Massachusetts university, he should have been wearing expensive suits and handling legal cases. However, reality hit him harder than a judge's gavel. A sharp ideological clash with his father, a conservative prosecutor, forced Jack from the comfort of his family home in Boston. He became an aimless city wanderer, carrying his entire life in nothing but a worn backpack and his barely remaining savings. Fate then led him to an old, dimly lit coffee shop, a place where artists and lost souls gathered. There, he reunited with his old friend, Kevin. Kevin was the type of man who always seemed anxious, as if an invisible weight were weighing on his shoulders. Every time they met, Kevin always talked about his family's property, a 2-story mansion in the upscale Oak Ridge neighborhood that, for some reason, had been unable to sell or rent for a long time. "The longest people last 3 months, Jack. Some even leave before the month is up," Kevin said, sipping his coffee with slightly trembling hands. Jack, who was already tired of sleeping on park benches or friends' couches, just laughed sarcastically. "Maybe it's because the price is too high, or the neighborhood is boring. Give it to me, and I'll look after it until it sells." Unbeknownst to him, that offer was the beginning of a contract unwritten in human law. Kevin handed over the house key without further ado. The next day, they stood in front of a tall iron gate that was already rusting through the carvings. The house was large, majestic, but looked lonely amidst the towering banyan trees. However, there was one odd thing. Kevin refused to go any further than the gate. He simply unlocked the gate, handed Jack the gate remote, and left, claiming he had urgent business to attend to. Jack stepped inside. An unnatural chill immediately greeted him, even though it was the height of summer. He opened the large wooden front door and was greeted by pitch darkness. Dust swirled in the sunlight that filtered through the glass windows. The house had 2 stories, with a wooden staircase winding through the center of the room, as if forming the backbone of the old structure. Jack chose the master bedroom on the ground floor. It was practical. It had an ensuite bathroom, so he wouldn't have to leave in the middle of the night. On the first day, Jack spent hours dusting and organizing his few clothes. He felt this house was a blessing. A free luxury home, he thought. This is the solution to my financial woes. However, the silence of the house began to speak as the sun set. As he was boiling noodles in the spacious kitchen, the sound emerged for the first time. The knocking sound was rhythmic, coming from behind the concrete wall to the right of the dining table. Jack stopped moving. He thought it was just a mouse or the expansion of the wood in the old building. However, the knocking came again, 3 times. Each time he tried to refocus on his food. The second strange thing happened a few minutes later. Jack put his water glass on the table and turned briefly to reach for his phone in his backpack, just 2 meters away. When he looked back, the glass was gone. Jack frowned, looking under the table, but it wasn't there. He walked to the sink, and his heart nearly jumped out of his chest. The glass stood upright beside the faucet, completely dry. "Okay, maybe I'm just tired," Jack muttered, trying to calm his faltering logic. The real terror didn't begin until 2 a.m. Jack woke to the same sound, 3 knocks on the wall. His acute sense of hearing alerted him. He knew he needed to use the bathroom. As he stepped out the bathroom door, which was in his bedroom, he froze. In the corner of the room, right next to the old wardrobe, stood a figure he would never forget. It resembled a human, but its height almost reached the ceiling. Its shoulders were broad and muscular, its skin a dull gray like dried cement. But what was most terrifying was its head. The creature had 2 large, sharply curved horns, resembling those of a mountain goat, but with a face more like that of a hungry wild dog. The horned figure didn't attack. It simply stood there, silent, its back to the moonlight window. Its dark eyes seemed to be counting Jack's every heartbeat. Jack couldn't scream. His voice felt stuck in his throat. He slowly retreated to the bed, pulled the covers over his head, and began to recite the prayers he remembered most. All night long, he could feel the creature's presence lingering there, silently watching him, as if waiting for the right moment to collect rent, paid not in money, but in his sanity. The first weeks at Oak Ridge House had changed Jack mentally. He learned to coexist with fear. The horned figure he encountered that first night, which he called the Guardian, had now become a terrifying routine. Every 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 knocks on the wall would wake him, and the figure would stand in a different corner, sometimes in the kitchen, sometimes right at the foot of his bed. Jack realized one thing. The creature seemed to be making sure he was still there, filling the emptiness of the house. However, this false peace was shattered when Jack decided to use the house as a base for operations, running a small business with his friends. He brought along Richard, a skeptic who didn't believe in anything beyond a microscope, and a few other crew members. Jack thought that if the house was crowded, the terror would fade. He was wrong. The crowds actually provoked the anger of the other residents, far more sinister than the horned figure. One afternoon, as they were moving office equipment to the first floor, one of the female crew members, Maya, suddenly stopped mid-stairs to the second floor. Her previously cheerful face turned deathly pale. She pointed down the dark corridor upstairs. "There's someone upstairs," Maya whispered, her voice trembling. Jack and Richard immediately ran upstairs, but they found no one. There was only a piercing cold and a musty odor, like clothes that hadn't been washed in decades. Jack tried to calm the situation, even though deep down he knew the Guardian had made a new friend. That night, while the crew was resting in the living room watching television, Jack decided to go up to the second floor alone to retrieve some files. As he passed the corridor, he felt an unusually cold chill on the back of his neck. He turned toward the inner balcony that overlooked the living room. There, sitting on the railing, was a woman. She wore a blood-red silk dress that was worn and torn at the bottom. Her long black hair partially obscured her face, which was as white as cracked porcelain. The coldness she radiated was far more terrifying than the horned figure, and Jack froze. The woman's eye, which was only visible from one side, stared straight at him with pure hatred. It was the lady in red. "Julian, look up!" shouted one of the crewmates from below. When Richard and the rest of the crew looked up, the woman was no longer sitting on the railing. Instead, she stood upright. Then, with unnaturally stiff movements, began crawling along the ceiling, disappearing into the darkness of the rooftop. Hysterical screams erupted in the living room. Richard, who had been skeptical, now remained silent, his face frozen. The terror began to become physical. Richard, who was trying to sleep in one of the downstairs rooms, was awakened by the sound of a camera tripod shifting on its own. When he checked, it had moved upright to the center of the room, pointing directly at him as he slept. Meanwhile, the other crew members, who were cooking instant noodles in the kitchen, experienced the same thing as Jack. Their plates and glasses were moved to the sink in the blink of an eye while they were off guard. The climax came when Jack tried to sleep on the second floor, as the downstairs room was already full of male crew members. In the middle of the night, he felt his blanket being pulled, roughly. He woke up and tried to pull it back, thinking it was his friend's prank. However, the tug was so strong that Jack was nearly dragged out of bed. The bed was kicked from under him with incredible force, as if someone was trapped underneath and trying to get out. Jack jumped out of bed and ran down the stairs without daring to look back. In the living room, he found his friends gathered, terrified. They had all heard the same sound. Footsteps running upstairs, and high-pitched laughter echoing through the hallway. "We can't stay here anymore, Jack," Richard said breathlessly. "This house isn't for us. It's a party, and we're the food." A deal was made. They decided to stay until the contract was completed, but with one rule: no one should ever be alone, and never look up if they hear a voice calling from the second floor. However, Jack knew the lady in red wasn't finished with them yet. She was just beginning to show who the true owner of this cursed luxury was. By 2013, the luxurious Oak Ridge house was no longer just a place to live for Jack. It resembled a prison without bars. The event organizing business he ran with Richard and his friends slowly began to falter. Not because of a lack of clients, but because the house's negative energy seemed to sap the vitality of anyone inside. Richard, the skeptic, had become a man who always carried a talisman in his pocket and refused to stay out past 8 at night. Jack himself had transformed into a shadow of his former self. His eyes were sunken, and his body had grown thinner. He had survived for 2 years not out of bravery, but because he had no other financial options. However, his patience ran out when the lady in red began to appear in broad daylight, standing between the pillars of the second-floor corridor, staring at him with a gaze that seemed to say his lease was over. Jack's last night in the house was marked by a deathly silence. There was no knocking. No dishes were moved. Only the sound of heavy breathing came from behind his bathroom door. Jack decided that his newly awarded college scholarship was his ticket to safety. He packed his backpack, just as he had when he first arrived. But this time, he didn't dare look in any of the mirrors in the house. When he handed Kevin the key at a coffee shop far from the Oak Ridge neighborhood, Kevin didn't seem surprised. "You've survived longer than anyone, Jack," Kevin said dryly. "A lot of people ask me how you've managed to stay. Honestly, I don't know." Jack couldn't help but smile bitterly. "I'm not staying, Kev. I'm just surviving." Jack now lives with a valuable lesson he didn't learn in law school. That some deals in this world aren't signed on paper, but rather on the courage of a man to face a darkness that never wants to go away. And in that house, on the dark second floor, the lady in red still awaits her next guest to dance with in the cold eternity.